Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in for our keynote discussion titled How to Thrive in Wellness During Challenging Times. My name is Jared Barul. I am a wellness specialist here in Virginia Beach, and I am joined by our amazing panelists. We have Danny Hill. She's a health educator for Optima Health. We have Todd Whitthorne. He's a chief inspiration officer at Wondr Health. And we have Becky Rabina. She's a health coach and registered dietitian for Virgin Pulse. So really appreciate you guys taking the time and participating in our Be Well Spring Fling event. Just before we get started, I just wanted to go into just a few minor housekeeping items. This is kind of a new platform that most of us have used. So there are just a couple different functions I wanted to go over. If you do have any questions, we'll do our best to address them towards the end if time allows. But there is a Q&A feature to go in and ask your questions. There's also a chat feature, a little bit different, you can use throughout the session to interact with some of the panelists as well as other attendees. If you come across any of the things that are said that you want to communicate with. But we are going to try to cover a lot of topics in a short amount of time. So we'll do our best to keep our responses short. But if you are seeking more information specifically related to any of the vendors that our panelists are representing, I really encourage you to visit their virtual vendor booths, and there you can go to chat with a representative from their organization. But now really going into, the meat of our session. Again, it's titled How to Thrive in Wellness During Challenging Times. It's really no surprise that, the past 2 years have been a challenge for us all. In the pandemic, it's not your, typical challenging time, I guess, so to speak, but we experienced gyms and yoga studios closing, business and social gatherings had other restrictions. And it really made it hard for us to plan health forward activities. And it's times like these, they really throw a wrench in our normal routine and, throw us off our game. And, it makes us, shift our priorities from thriving to simply just trying to survive. And instead of focusing on how we can, get or remain healthy and happy, we're really just trying to, stay safe and keep our loved ones safe. But I know one thing that, I've learned and, that we know from this pandemic is the majority of fatalities and really serious illnesses from COVID occurred in those with, premorbidities and other conditions that they had prior. So instead of our wellness taking a back seat, I think it's something we should be using this time to focus on helping ourselves, maybe for future challenging times that may arise, and help us keep us safe for other things that may occur. And of course, the pandemic is just, one challenging time, and it's just on the forefront of our minds just because, we're living through it, but it doesn't necessarily need to be something as drastic as the pandemic. A challenging time can be, a hectic week at work where you don't have time for some of your other responsibilities, or you just lost a loved one and you're learning to live in that new normal. Again, basically anything that just kind of throws you off your normal game. And that's really the purpose of why, we gather these knowledgeable panelists for you today is to see how we can focus our wellness during these challenging times. So really just to kick things off, what are some of the challenges you're seeing employees face? I know for us, in Virginia Beach, step tracking is a really big popular aspect of our program. And of course, the pandemic made it difficult for people to find the space to get their steps in and exercise. So I guess, Becky, let's start with you. What are some of the struggles you're seeing people face?
So yeah, along the lines of the step challenge, I heard a lot through the pandemic, just the shift from being in the office to working from home, the decrease in, just energy burn. It could be something as simple as just getting in your car and driving to work, walking from your car to the office. You were burning more energy that way than you are like sitting in your house, in your kitchen. So that was like a common theme that popped up over the past 2 years, I would say. But now it's kind of interesting now that we're seeing a transition back into the office and kind of having to reverse some of those, adaptations that we did over the past 2 years. So it's kind of interesting to see what challenges people are faced with that way. But, really like everything that we do and everything that we feel affects our overall wellness. So, if we're, like you said, if we're thriving instead of just surviving, that's what's going to help reduce our stress, reduce risk of illness, and just promote positive interactions in our lives. So, from my perspective as a health coach, it's about setting teeny tiny little small step goals to kind of get you from point A to point B, regardless of what your challenge is. So, like I said, it's been really interesting to see the shifts over the past couple of years.
Yeah, totally agree. Danny, do you have any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think Becky hit the nail on the head there with the energy shift. We joked a lot when we came into this kind of what was going to be a temporary work at home situation that our new favorite coworker was our refrigerator. And there's truth in that. But I do think the ripple effect, as Becky mentioned, that we're easing back into a new normal. The one thing that I feel like I've heard over and over again is just this inability to plan long-term. So yes, absolutely. Our goals should be small goals that build upon each other, but you still kind of want to have some foresight. You want to kind of have a vision of where you want to end up at a certain period of time. And with all the fluctuations and the requirements of what we needed from work or for our safety, whatever governing body, whether it was your employer or, your locality, as things have changed over the past 2 years, it's made it difficult to stick to a long-term plan. So I think we're all still in a little bit of shell shock around that. And then another thing I would add to that is just, I know me personally, I have a major attention deficit now. I lack the motivation to, I want to get started with something, but it's hard to keep that staying power and keep pushing through it. And I think that's, again, just kind of not knowing what the next day was going to bring a lot of times. So it's definitely something that we're going to, I think, have to adjust to and learn how to build back from it, because it's not going to be the same as it was beforehand, I think, for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like what you said about the refrigerator being, your favorite coworker. I often, found myself going into the kitchen multiple times a day, just kind of out of boredom and just knowing it's there rather than me actually being hungry. And I'm sure, Todd, you can speak more to that, coming from Wondr Health, our weight management program, seeing a lot of, differences in our nutrition and other, daily habits, whether it's our physical wellness or, other aspects as well.
Yeah, great point. It's interesting about the past 2 years, and thinking that this has lasted 2 years is pretty amazing, considering what we were thinking about in the middle of March of 2020. No one thought that this was going to be around for that long. But the reality is, we're all in this same storm, but we're in different boats. And so each and every one of us on this call around the country and literally around the world got impacted differently. And for the most part, there were people that were negatively impacted as reflected by health status, right? So we look at things like body mass index or physical activity or blood pressure, all of these. Now we have enough time to look at that data. And on average, folks have been migrating in a less healthy direction than before, which is not super encouraging, right? Because before the pandemic, it's not like we were the healthiest country on earth. So I think what is really interesting and what I think most people recognize now is this, what's known as bidirectionality of health, right? The head and the body are connected. So psychologically or emotionally, we're seeing really disturbing numbers around emotional health, around not just uncertainty and anxiety, but depression, suicidal ideation. Those kind of things are shifting, but it's also connected to our physical health, right? The head and the body are connected. And so I think what's really important is to recognize that, yeah, it's not ideal, but life is really never ideal. The only thing that's different is we all got punched by the same thing at the same time. But in general, life is not a straight line. So how do we manage through that? And the term, how do we thrive as opposed to just survive, whether you're in a pandemic or not? the great news is the body responds well to what you ask it to do. You just have to have a game plan and a strategy, some sort of playbook to help you manage through it. And that's what's cool to see, because there's plenty of people that have, during the past 24 months, have actually thrived and done pretty well. But you have to be intentional about it. And I think that's the biggest challenge, is not to just fall victim to what's going on, but to say, okay, what can I intentionally do to really make a difference so that I show up better, I have more energy, I can experience more joy, as opposed to really going the opposite direction. So that's exciting. And obviously, both Danny and Becky recognize that, right? We don't have to just use this as an excuse. We can actually, if we want to, intentionally figure out strategies to thrive.
That's a great point. I'd love for you to expand on that a little bit. I mean, you were saying the same storm, but different boat. I mean, of course, everyone's going to handle situations differently, but how would you address this, from a personal standpoint on what people can do, going forward to take a handle on it?
Well, if you specifically think about the pandemic, there's really only two things that we could do. One was everything possible to not get the virus. Early on, you think about that. We were washing our hands, and it was really aggressive. So do what you can not to get it. But the other component is, if you do get it, how can you take a punch? So there was a great study that came out late last year, which I found fascinating, where a big group out in California, Kaiser folks, looked at over 50,000 men and women, and they ranked the comorbidities. They ranked the quote unquote underlying health conditions that people were faced with. Because when we hear somebody being impacted by COVID, most of the time you're going to hear either all or all but one had underlying health conditions when they talk about going into the hospital or not coming out of the hospital. And this particular study looked at 10 underlying health conditions and ranked them as being the best predictors of what was going to have a bad outcome, and as it related to COVID. And at the very top of the list was, are you an organ recipient? Do you have someone else's heart or lungs? Which makes sense, because you're going to be a bit immunocompromised. The second on the list was age, which also makes sense, right? Younger people in general are healthier than older people. Those are non-modifiable risk factors. But the other 8, which included diabetes and cancer and smoking and blood pressure, obesity, physical inactivity, renal disease, all of those things are modifiable. And when you rank those, the one that was most predictive of someone either going in or not coming out of the hospital due to COVID was physical inactivity. Your fitness level has a huge impact on your ability to take a punch. We can control that, each and every person, right? And yeah, the world changed, but we can all go for a walk, right? We can get outside, breathe some fresh air, get a little vitamin D. That, to me, we have to be able to think about what we can control. And that is us. And our health is our responsibility. We can't outsource it. So figuring out ways in this new world to strategize and be intentional about things that we know work, right? Sleep is another thing, for crying out loud. It's the most important thing we can be doing right now to, emotionally recharge. And how do we go about building better sleep hygiene habits, which I know, Becky and Danny are experts in that. There's certain things that we all can control that are going to make our life better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree. What some of the other barriers you're seeing, some people face, whether it's, I know you said there's things, of course, out of our control, but what are some other barriers that you are seeing people face that they can do, something about? Danny, Becky, either one of you, seeing anything in particular?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting what you were saying about the physical health, trying to keep your body safe in COVID. And along with sleep, I think it's like a trifecta: sleep, nutrition, and exercise. And one of the biggest things that I've seen in coaching is lack of access to a gym, or if you did belong to a gym, your gym closed and you just got out of your regular physical activity routine for whatever reason. And to be honest, I think that this was actually one of the good things to come out of COVID, was all of the virtual exercise workout programs that are now available. If we look at how the world kind of shifted, or the word pivot, I think was the word of 2020, 2021. So the whole industry kind of had to pivot to adapt to the virtual world, which, that was really helpful in knocking down some of those barriers.
Yeah, piggybacking on that, I would say that there's also a little bit of isolation, that you maybe didn't have your same kind of accountability, whether it was going to a gym and, maybe a group exercise instructor, noticed that you weren't there or whatever. You missed out on having that accountability. So you had to be more self-accountable, which is a big shift, I think, for a lot of folks. And so having more virtual resources, you could find that group of people that were like-minded, that wanted to move in the same ways as you, or maybe, just even being able to go outside and meet your neighbors. I mean, I've lived in my neighborhood for 3 years, for example, and I literally during the pandemic met more neighbors than I had in the year prior. So I think it's just a shift of mindset of, maybe stepping out of your comfort zone a little bit, so to speak, and finding more like-minded people that are like you, that have the same type of motivation to want to keep themselves healthy. And I think, Todd, you did such a great job of illustrating how modifiable risk factors really are a driving force in keeping you safe, not just in this instance, but in many more instances to come in the future. And just the longevity of a healthy lifestyle is going to provide for you to age more gracefully in the long run. So, I think just finding that support system, even if it's not your traditional one, now that we have these virtual options, is a huge benefit, and that will help to break down a barrier right there.
Yeah, social wellness was a huge, learning curve for me. I'm used to attending like group fitness classes. So like you said, Becky, luckily there are, all those virtual options, but I was so used to going into a gym and being in a class where we're all doing the same thing, about 30 of us. So learning to, shift how I, exercise and, just plan on my daily schedule was a big piece. And, often social wellness isn't something that we think about, at least the first thing that we think about when we think of wellness or health. We're thinking of sleep, diet, nutrition, like you said, but, it all plays an important role and they're all, interconnected. So are there other areas where you're seeing, some of these deficits, whether it's, occupational or environmental wellness or, financial, other areas than, the main big three that we think of that you guys are seeing, these big issues arise?
Yeah. So I health coach for a health system, and I would say the last several months, especially, there's been the Great Resignation, where people are changing jobs. So unfortunately, the health system has been severely understaffed, and what this led to is obviously an increase of stress level of the employees there. And I was talking with one of the other coaches, and, I said, I was reading this article about how all these companies have these great initiatives for wellness and we want to keep our employees healthy. Let's give them yoga. And I'm thinking, yoga doesn't take the work off of their plate. They need more than that. They need less work and more time to take care of themselves. And that was really eye-opening for me to come to that realization as far as like, how can I help my clients, get the well-being that they're looking for?
Yeah, I would say that, a lot of the attention, at least out of the gate, was focused wellness-wise on those that transitioned to work from home. And there was a large majority of us that did that temporarily or now are work from home. But there was also a lot of people that never left work. And I know from also working for a healthcare system that, we have a lot of employees that they have been boots on the ground from day one. And there's a lot of oversight for what those folks need too. Mm-hmm. And so one thing that you'll hear in the wellness industry quite a bit, and we've adopted it at Optima as well, is wellness being symbolized by a wheel, that there are different cogs in a wheel. There are different aspects of wellness that all kind of have to be addressed, because if you think about a wheel like similar to a tire, if you've got an aspect of that wheel that's not functioning, that's not being addressed, the tire, right, is not going to be able to go the direction that you want it to as efficiently. It's not going to be able to change direction as efficiently if they're not all being addressed. So yes, there's all of these different dimensions of wellness that we could talk about, but I think it's just kind of honing in on the aspects for you individually that are the lowest hanging fruit. So if you are work from home, maybe it is that your fridge is your new coworker, but if you are still were a frontline worker and you still are, and you have gone to work every day since the beginning, maybe it is sleep. You know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily have to be the same for everyone. So I know that that's a big answer, but it's a big question too.
You guys I'm just meeting you both for the first time, but I think we're going to be friends because it's true. I mean, there's not one aspect of this and there's not one answer because everybody's different. I'm a big basketball fan. I follow primarily, the NBA, and Kevin Love, who plays for the Cavaliers, who 2018 pre-pandemic admitted publicly that he suffered from anxiety and depression. And Kevin has a great quote where he says, everybody is going through something that we can't see. And that's been especially, important now, right? So, you guys talking about healthcare workers, holy cow, what a horrific 24 months it's been for them. I do a lot of work with educators in both the K through 12 space as well as higher ed. And, if you work in public education now, it's really hard. It's really, really hard to not anger somebody each and every day of your life because it's the world that we live in. So it's really, I think, very important for us to recognize that finding a strategy that works for us, that will help us manage health above and below the neck, and not independently, but understanding that both are critical. I talked about that earlier, but really focusing on the emotional health, recognizing that it's okay not to be okay right now. And the statistics are crazy about that. And so the things, obviously, Jared, that the city of Virginia Beach is doing is awesome. They are signaling very intentionally to the employees, within the region that we recognize that there's not an elephant in the room. There's a herd of elephants in the room. Let's not ignore it, and let's do what we can for those that are interested in just feeling better, right? That's what people want right now. They want to have more hope. They want to have more optimism and excitement about the future. And it can be done if you strategically put those pieces of the puzzle together. That's what we try to do with our Wondr curriculum. And we do it in conjunction with a lot of other programs. In fact, we have a lot of mutual clients with Virgin Pulse around the country. I did a webinar this morning, as a matter of fact, with the city of Garland in a suburb of Dallas that's with Virgin Pulse. And we plug in with that because it's not one thing that's going to solve this. But it is important, I think, for the folks that are watching today to recognize that your health is your responsibility. There's no one on the face of the earth, almost 8 billion people now in the world. No one has more impact on you than you do. Not your employer, not your spouse, not your doctor, not the government. No, it's really up to you. And that's cool. That's really good news. And you have resources available to you that if you don't like where you are, if you don't like point A and you want to go to point B, you've got strategies to help you do that. And that's what I think is really exciting about what you guys are doing at the city.
Yeah, I love that you brought up Kevin Love because I feel like he just kind of started a chain reaction. So many other, athletes and celebrities. There's, Calvin Ridley's an NFL football player who opted out of the season to focus on his mental health, and
right.
Countless other people with high visibility. And it shows that even when you're making millions and millions of dollars, you're still suffering the same issues as regular Joe Schmoes. So it can really affect everyone, and that can change on a day-to-day basis. It's kind of a constant process, and you're never going to be 100% well. There's always going to be something that you can kind of be focusing on. With Dana, I kind of just wanted to backpedal real quick, going to the shift to work from home. I know, a few years ago, that used to be one of the most coveted and most wanted perks that employers offered. And now, almost everyone, aside from healthcare workers and essential workers, were kind of forced into it. And now things going back to normal are kind of dialing back. But I mean, where do you see the future of that going? Do you think it's staying with, work from home, or are there other perks and benefits that are going to be better for, employee health and wellness?
I mean, I don't think work from home is going anywhere. I mean, I think that a lot of companies have been able to shift pretty well. I mean, Optima did an amazing job of shifting about 90% of their workforce to remote very quickly, and our productivity has not changed. And I think a lot of companies can say the same kind of thing. The one thing I think that we've seen a lot of, and this is because of COVID, is a lot of attention on resiliency. And I think that is going to be a theme that will carry on, just because the change, and that I'm speaking personally now, but the change from being in an office to being 100% remote for me is not having my day in buckets, right? So not having, okay, now is the time that I focus on work. And now is the time that I'm a mom. And now is the time that I do my laundry, or you know what I mean? All of those lines are blurred. And so I think that the resiliency is going to go farther in terms of how do you find yourself thriving and meeting your wellness goals and being more intentional with your time, more mindful with what you're doing and how you're doing it, how to be more efficient with your time. I kind of see that as being a lasting impact. But I do think that a lot of people will stay remote. And I think right now, the thing that's nice about that is that you do have more flexibility to find the type of job that is going to meet your needs and that's going to help your well-being, whether that means financially or it's going to reduce your stress or you're going to find a company that might align with your beliefs. You have more flexibility to do that right now. So I think that's going to stay because I think a lot of employers are going to find that to be an attractive benefit.
And Becky, I know you were talking about goal setting and shifting, from maybe long-term to short-term, but also just helping, plan out your day. But how do you think that kind of works hand in hand with, what Daniel was talking about in scheduling out her days and, finding, that line of working while you're from home, but then also, your personal obligations while you're at home?
Yeah, I think it's important to know what your own priorities are. Sometimes we, get caught up in the day to day and forget what we're working for, so I think it's really helpful even to write it down or keep a planner, keep something visual that you can see of what your overarching goals are, what you want to accomplish this week, this year, this month, whatever it may be, and then breaking that down into smaller achievable goals. I have lots of my clients in the morning will sit down and write a list of 3 things that they want to get done that day. Then at the end of the day, write a list of 3 things that they accomplished that day, just to avoid the feeling of, oh man, I don't feel like I did anything today, and then checking in with that makes them feel a little bit more accomplished. So putting those things in black and white is sometimes helpful. Because like I said, if you get too caught up in the day to day, you forget kind of what your overarching goals are. And it could be personal, it could be work related, like Danny said, with the work from home, sometimes that stuff bleeds together and that's okay. That might actually be beneficial for us all, but just knowing what your goals are, I think is the point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If I could chime in one more time, Becky, because you said something that resonated with me with goals. We talk about this a lot at Optima too, about making your goals inclusive to your routine, making them match your routine. So, something as simple as, you want to eat better. You want to eat more fruits and vegetables, for example. A lot of us will say, okay, I'm not going to order any food. I'm not going to DoorDash anything today. I'm not going to go through the drive-through anymore. I'm done. And it makes it hard to I'll give you a personal example. I coach my daughter's softball team. There are some nights that I'm out at the ball field 4 nights a week. If I forgot to put something in the crock pot, you might have to go to get fast food, right? So I might feel like I've already deterred myself. I've already kind of failed. But if we make goals that are better built to mimic our lifestyles, so maybe for me, that means I'm just going to put more fruits and vegetables in my diet. That way, if I have to go to the drive-through, I can order a side salad instead of French fries, right? Or I can get a fruit cup or something. And that's an example, movement, not giving yourself 30 minutes of a block of time, but 3 10-minute segments of time, just finding ways that you can incorporate what you want to accomplish into your routine. So it doesn't feel like just another thing that you're adding onto your plate, but something that can flow seamlessly through your day. I think is very helpful too.
So true. You have to make it doable and realistic for your own personal life. That's really the only way it's going to stick in the long run. Great point.
When I think of goals, it's interesting because there's kind of 2 buckets of goals, right? You've got outcome goals, I want to lose 10 pounds, or you have kind of more identity goals. What's your identity? What kind of person do you want to be? How do you want to show up? James Clear writes a lot about this in his book, Atomic Habits. It's the difference of I want to run a 10K versus I'm a runner, or I want to write a book versus I'm a writer. What do you want at a high level? And it takes some thought, right? Is what do you want to be? What do you want your identity to be? And how do you show up? And then what are you doing to get there? And so from my perspective, and I've spent a lot of time trying to analyze this, from my standpoint, the one word that encompasses everything we talk about health is the word habit. A habit is something you do without thinking about it. And if you can habitualize good behavior, that you do it without even thinking about it. Think about tying your shoe or brushing your teeth or putting on your seatbelt when you get in the car or truck. Those are habits. You don't think about it. And at least 50 to 70% of your day is habitual. And most of us have good habits, and some, we have bad habits too. And so doing that inventory and saying, okay, what are those priorities? What are the things where I can be better? Not that I can be perfect or that I'm going to compare myself to anybody else. How can I be a little bit better tomorrow? And Becky talked about it earlier, right? The tree, you can start with the big three, sleep, physical activity, and what are you putting in your mouth? Cut the crap, pardon my French, but that's a great place to start. Just stop putting bad stuff in your gas tank. And that is and we all know right from wrong when it comes to that. You don't have to be a biochemist to figure that out. And so realizing that, again, it's our responsibility. If we want to be better and healthier, how can we intentionally build habits so that moving forward, we don't have to think about this? It's not like being on a diet, or it's not like being on a plan. It's just who I am. It's what I do. And this is this is what defines me. And that identity habit or that identity goal, I think, is super helpful in helping people maybe sometimes get off the mark, as opposed to just short-term goals, which are very critical, by the way. And stacking those goals, little wins. I'm going to be physically active every day this week. Doesn't mean I'm going to go to the gym or I'm going to run a 5K. I'm just going to get off the butt and go walk the dog, even if I don't have one. And if I do it for 5 minutes, I check the box. And then suddenly I'm moving in that direction, and I'm changing the way I think about myself. And I show up as an athlete, right? I now think of myself, I'm an athlete. Like Bill Bowerman, the late great track and field coach at Oregon, used to say, if you have a body, you're an athlete. And we are. That's the way we're designed. So that, I think, is, that word habit to me, how do we build healthy habits in a very challenging environment, especially now? It can't be done. We see it time and time again. But it's just about being intentional and taking responsibility for it.
Yeah. I love what you said about tying your shoes, brushing your teeth. I find myself saying that all the time. You want it to be as natural as brushing your teeth. I'll give a personal example. I wanted to start a mindfulness practice. And I've always been a very consistent exerciser. Get up in the morning, exercise first thing. That was like brushing my teeth. That's what I automatically do. So what I did was I just linked a 10-minute meditation to the end of that physical activity, routine. So get up in the morning, do my workout, 10 minutes of meditation right away. Yep. Once you connect to those habits, then that's your new healthy habit. So whatever you want to do, sometimes it's helpful to link it to something that you're already doing.
Absolutely. This evidence is huge there. Brushing your teeth, flossing, right?
Exactly.
I'm already doing this. And if you're not a consistent flosser, just start adding that on. And suddenly, like you said, they become one.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, kind of that same example, Todd. I've never been a big flosser. Every time I'm at the dentist, they always tell me, you're good with the brushing, but do better with the flossing. So I've started just to put the floss right next to the toothbrush. I mean, I know that kind of sounds pretty obvious, but just keeping it in plain sight is just, a kind of a constant reminder to me that that's something I should be doing, a daily or twice daily, I guess.
Totally agree.
That's pretty much as far as questions go. I mean, I know we were kind of playing ping pong, bouncing around. I wanted to give you each, an opportunity just for some closing thoughts. If there was something you were hoping to say that you didn't get a chance to say, I mean, if you've already said everything that's on your mind, feel free to to pass. I don't want to put you on the spot, unprovoked, but just wanted to give you guys, another opportunity, maybe like a minute or 2 minutes just to give some closing remarks. Becky, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I think the take homes to remember here would be everything is not independent of anything else. So your physical activity relates to your nutrition, relates to your stress level, relates to your sleep. So like Danny was saying with the wheel, nothing is independent of anything else. So it's a matter of, the low hanging fruit and setting goals. The best advice that I can give with goal setting is try to find the shortest distance between point A and point B. Again, that will give you some longevity with it. If the change that you're making is super small and you feel like you can stick to it in the long run, then roll with that and build on that. But it's, setting lofty goals that are often unrealistic. That's what kind of deters people from achieving those goals. So I think those 2 points would probably be my take home with that.
That's awesome. Yeah. Danny, anything to add?
This is going to sound strange, but I usually will give this example a lot when we are talking about traditional physical well-being. But treat yourself and the attention that you want to give to your health the way that you would do for your child, right? So I recognize that not everyone is a parent, but even just intuitively, you would want a child to have a regular sleep schedule. You would want a child to eat a well-balanced meal. You would want a child to reduce the amount of time that they're staring at a screen. You would want them to move their body every day. It's the basics, right? So if you can think back to that time in your life when you had a little one and you wanted them to have healthy habits, you need to do the same for yourself. So if you don't really know where to start, one of the great things about BEWell is that y'all have broken down so many barriers for people just to get started. They have so many different ways that they can go. So explore those options and figure out how you can start just applying the basics to your routine, and start there and see what sticks and let that ball keep rolling.
Yeah, I love that example you used of, getting your children into good habits. I saw a meme the other day. It was saying that kids don't realize how good they have it. They get to nap in the middle of the day. We tell them to drink so much water. As kids, we don't like water. We want like soda or Gatorade. But, as an adult, you realize how good water is, and, you get to bed at an early time. So I thought that would align pretty well with what you were saying. Todd, any last remarks?
Yeah, there's one thing that seems to, I have found to be super helpful, and I always like actionable suggestions and give it a shot. This little device is a very, very powerful tool. It can be used for good or evil. And I don't know if everybody's had a chance to see on Netflix, the Social Dilemma. But it is incredible when you look at really what's kind of happened since about 2012, and not just to kids and teenagers, but to all of us. And I do believe that we need to pay particular attention to kind of what kind of influence it's having on our psyche, because the reality is there's a lot of currency. There's a lot of the ability to get us twisted or wrapped around the axle is good business for some of those social media companies, right? They want us to be worked up and to be engaged and be locked in. So I've been practicing, actually, it started well before the pandemic, what I call ALF, ALF. It stands for at least 5. So I'm pretty pathological about this. When I wake up every single morning, I refuse to look at my phone, turn on the TV or the radio, or look at a newspaper, anything, for at least 5 minutes. That usually turns into more like 15 or 30. But I want to make sure, I have found through my life that if I start the day right, the odds are going to be overwhelming that it's going to go better than if I start the day agitated. And the science supports that, by the way, because the quality of sleep that we get, not just the amount of sleep, but the quality of deep sleep, right? REM sleep, deep sleep really happens in the second half of the night. And if you get up routinely and the first thing you do is look at your phone and you get, pretty triggered around a headline or some sort of whatever it happens to be, that's going to really have an impact over time, because your brain starts, it's what's called anticipatory anxiety. You start anticipating, I'm going to start my day anxious. That's not a good way to start the day. And so that ends up really impacting the last 2 or 3 or 4 hours of your night, where really that's where you're getting the emotional convalescence. So simple things to recognize that you're in charge. Don't let some robot, some algorithm, some multinational company, try to influence how you feel about yourself or feel about your day. Start your day with 5 minutes of just you, right? And just really focus on coming out of the gate hopeful, with gratitude, with energy. I have a feeling it's going to have a really pretty significant impact. And all I encourage, try it for a week. Just give it 5 minutes each morning for a week and see if it doesn't pay dividends for you. So that's just one little nugget that I think can help us figure out a way to get through this, whatever this happens to be. But there's, if it's not this, it could be that, right? So we have to have strategies that we can always depend on, how to build skills to be successful regardless of what's going on around us. Epictetus said it best. It's not what happens to you, it's how you react to it that matters. And that's our choice. And so it's pretty cool. Jared, I just want to thank you, by the way, you and the city, for doing what you're doing, because it's important. You're signaling to your employees and the families that this kind of stuff is critical and important, and you're providing solutions and options that are beneficial. So I think it's cool.
Of course. Thank you, Todd. I appreciate you saying that. I know we've tried to cover lots of topics about the various dimensions of wellness. We do have like a vast list of resources that, our employees have available to them at no cost. So they can find all that in the Virtual BEWell Booth, where the vendor booths are. We're also going to be in Building 19 all day. If anyone wants to come meet us face to face, have a little chat. But kind of going off what you said prior to that, Todd, about whether it's this or it's that, not everything's going to go according to plan, as, the pandemic's taught us. So we need to be flexible. Our schedule, we might map it out, that day or the day before, the week before, what we're going to be doing that day. But something might come up and you might have to skip a portion. You might not be able to, have the meal that you planned out so perfectly, and you might have to do something on the road. So just to give yourself a little bit of grace and be flexible, and just adapt to the situation as best as you can. But thank you all so much. I really appreciate all your input. I know our employees are going to enjoy it as well, but we're coming up on the hour. I don't want to steal, too much more of your valuable time. So Todd, Danny, Becky, again, thanks for your expertise. We do have a lot more sessions today. So feel free to view the agenda. I believe right after this, we have a session on family relationships, and then shortly afterwards, something about financial planning. But if you're looking for something a little bit more informal and you're ready to let loose, we're hosting a virtual karaoke at 5:30. Kind of a fun way to get your work team together in a more social aspect. So, hopefully you guys can tune in. But again, thank you all for your time, and appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thanks
so much.
Yeah.